The seed plants, particularly the flowering plants, are the most numerous and diverse plants alive today, but they were the last group to evolve. The earliest plants were not even vascular. They could not grow tall because they lacked vascular tissue to conduct water upwards. By the Silurian period, not only were there non-vascular plants, which seemed to be relatives of vascular plants, but also the very first vascular plants which could grow tall. Later in the Devonian, there were a number of primitive vascular plant lineages which lacked leaves but could grow tall using green stems. And then later in the Devonian, there were actually true leaves, although many were microphyls. They were small leaves with only one vessel of vascular tissue that did not branch, similar to what the club mosses have today, as opposed to, say, ferns, which have large leaves with branching vessels. These are known as megaphylls. So that's what the primitive plants looked like. And there are primitive plants which look like that today. So for example, whisk ferns and horsetails, they do not have seeds or flowers, and they certainly seem primitive. Whisk ferns, such as those represented here, do not have true roots, rather use an underground stem known as a rhizome. The leaves are very reduced and they don't have vascular tissue, and so therefore could be called innations rather than a true leaf. The stems branch in the same way that many primitive vascular plants did from the fossil record, and their gametophyte lives underground and is saprobic like that of lycopods. So these certainly seem to be primitive. Horsetails, the genus Equisetum, do have leaves, but they are typically not photosynthetic. They are very small and typically are not green. It is the green stem which performs photosynthesis. These features of horsetails, like those of whisk ferns, were traditionally interpreted to be primitive, having arisen from lineages of the early vascular plants before the evolution of leaves and the lineages which would give rise to both club mosses with their small microphyll leaves and then the ferns and seed plants with the larger megaphyll leaves. A number of modern analyses, both anatomical and also genetic, have slightly modified the interpretation of the position of these two groups of plants in the family tree of plants. While they are certainly primitive, they seem to have some features and molecularly group with the ferns, although they would be among the most basal ferns. And so, in other words, in this family tree, instead of being primitive vascular lineages which branch before the club mosses, they represent reduced basal fern relatives, which would branch from the family tree just after the separation of the lineage with the club mosses. Some of their simple features may be reduction. So just as snakes lost the legs their ancestors had, maybe the very simple leaf-like structures are reductions from more elaborate leaves that ancestors once had. So these are primitive plants, but their exact position in the plant family tree is under some reclassification due to new studies.